Up next, we have Scott, Frank, and Lucas, and they're going to tell us about how automation is hard, but it is definitely worth it, and I tend to agree wholeheartedly. And their talk is called RMF in a DevOps World. Let's give them a nice round of applause.
So there's free beer out there, and you guys still stayed in here? I don't know what that says about y'all. So while we get set up, is it going to come up? Lucas is looking for a password.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Everybody,
Security.
Yeah.
Very secure here.
So the three of us come.
That is, that's a big password there.
So the three of us come from a company called Concurrent Technologies Corporation near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, so not too far from here. CTC is a independent high-tech research and development firm, mainly working with the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, do a lot of this sort of work. And so you would think that, you know, our government is as efficient as they are, right? It's all about efficiency within the government. You know, yeah, some thumbs up there. Is that, you know, automation and DevOps would play right into, you know, accreditation process that they use. So I'm Scott, been at CTC for quite a while. I'm the principal cybersecurity engineer.
I'm Frank. I'm a sysadmin at CTC. Work a lot with Scott on our external clients and Lucas on our internal corporate network.
And I'm Lucas, and I'm a security engineer, also at CTC.
So real quick, about 2 weeks ago, yeah, Lucas was promoted to a manager. Oh, so, yeah. So, yeah, for months, he busted my, whatever. Yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll move on.
I called manager.
Yeah, no, he was giving me a hard time. He's calling me a manager, and now, yeah. So just to show, yeah, so he's non-technical, but this is like his going away party, I guess. But, so, show of hands, who in the room works with the risk management framework? So quite a few. How about DevOps? We're trying to integrate DevOps or automation into there. So the risk management framework is something that's been around within the United States government for not that long. It was where their move from going from a prescriptive security approach, a check block mentality, if you will, security approach, to a more of applying the appropriate levels of controls. I'll talk a bit about that. I probably don't want to jump ahead too far, but you know, so the big idea behind our talk is how the DevOps and the continuous deployment pipeline, if set up right, done right with the automation, how that really supports the RMF process or the compliance, right, or the system security plans. But I'll turn it over to you for now, Lucas.
Can I get that clicker?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So, okay, we did that already. That's good. Agendas. I do have a couple memes in here because you never want to show up memeless for the presentation. So not as many as I'd like, because that's really the important part of the talk, right, is getting the memes right. So it takes so long that you often, sometimes, spend a lot of time there. It's worth it. So we're going to talk quickly about, so DevOps, give some background of what DevOps is. I mean, well, what we think DevOps is, because it's kind of one of those buzzword bingo things everyone likes to talk about. Then also RMF, the background there, and why we think some of the pre-RMF stuff was really terrible and set us up for some bad habits, especially on the government side. And then how we can bring those two things together, RMF and DevOps, to experience some efficiencies or synergies, as we managers like to talk about all the time. Synergies.
New paradigm.
And then, so one of the things we want to talk, or sort of caution about, I guess, is because you hear people talking about things. Hey, do this, it'll save the world, and it's really easy. But automation is really hard. It's something that is implementing it at an organizational level, especially, is difficult because it's a mindset change in how we address things, how we do things. Everyone thinks you're trying to take their job away by scripting out those things that they do. So it's something that takes time, and it's going to be difficult. So although I think there's a lot of value in it, it's certainly something that you have to consider at the cost of before jumping into. So DevOps, applying development principles to infrastructure and trying to do those releases and things rapidly, getting things out there quickly. So prior to DevOps, I think that this is one of my next items here is what we did before that, which was not as fun or as good. But then you have RMF, which is a risk management framework, which the DoD introduced as a way to try to introduce the value of what you're securing or the impact of if it goes down into the process of securing it. So a lot of times you have $10,000 in security for 50 cents worth of asset because the process doesn't support anything less. So we don't want to do that.
No. So prior to the RMF process, the risk management framework, the government for many years, and you probably see this in other regulated environments or compliance environments, where it's more of a prescriptive approach to security, right? Where the security controls don't really take into account the risk levels or the categorization of the data, where, for many, many years, the government did this painful thing called DICAP. And like Luke's, I don't know who comes up with the acronym, but the idea is that it wasn't there was no continuous monitoring of the security posture of the application or the system. You would do at a point in time, you would build this really thick system security plan. I don't know if you guys do that often, right? A lot of the paperwork, throw it over the fence, and a couple of years later, you come back and try to look at it and figure out what has changed, right? So what we're excited about with the risk management, well, I don't know if that's kind of the right thing. We're happy to see with the risk management framework, they're applying the right levels of security for the data, right? Not applying $1 million worth of data, or security to $10 worth of data. Yep. So importantly, right?
And then, so in the development world, you have the pre-DevOps environments in which developers would go away, we go have some probably not even technical people, go talk to clients because we don't like talking to clients, go gather some requirements, bring some of those back to me. We're all going to squirrel away in a basement somewhere with a bunch of energy drinks and stuff, and we're going to give you something in like 5 years, sometimes 10, sometimes never get anything, right? There was this idea of throwing products over the fence. And of course, it doesn't end up, well, in the history of software, I think we've seen over and over again that just doesn't work. It doesn't allow us to schedule well. It doesn't allow us to give customers, clients, what they need at the end of the process because they're so long, and the speed of change is now drastically different than what it was when we were even considering those types of technologies.
So who here has seen The Other Guys, the movie? Yeah. So if you know what this is.
Yeah.
The TLC reference.
Yeah. So RMF, as I said, attempts to address that old DICAP mentality of, hey, we're going to throw it over the fence in 3 years and you guys get to deal with it. I worked on an engagement one time where we were trying to help a system achieve accreditation, and the system was in a nuclear fallout shelter, and it didn't have it was also air gapped, right? But we stepped into this. We walked in. Okay, let's see what the update posture of the system is. So the system itself hadn't been touched in almost 3 years exactly. So since 3 years before that was the last time they applied patches, updated antivirus signatures. I mean, anything besides something to keep it running, they hadn't touched anything security-wise because it was difficult. They didn't care because no one was checking them on it, and they didn't have to care, I guess. I mean, one of those things about standards and compliance, which, I mean, don't we all love compliance? Isn't it awesome? Like, compliance is wonderful, right? You want to get up in the morning, go do compliance-y things. No, not really. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, we hate having someone say you're insecure because you didn't meet this requirement in this standard, which may or may not be a security thing. But because of problems like this, because no one's checking what people are doing and implementing security-wise, compliance has become something that we're going to have to deal with. As long as there are threats, and as long as there are developers like we should be who only do what we're supposed to do or are told to do, right? Then compliance and holding our feet to the fire with some type of standard and assessment is going to be important. So risk management framework attempts to kind of take that away by saying, okay, you know what? We're going to try to set up this thing that, first of all, we're going to evaluate you based on risk. So what's the impact level of your system? And if you have an RMF background, you're familiar with that. You get it drilled into your head, and like the FIPS 199, what's your impact stuff. And even those categories are really broad. It's hard to figure out what the heck is the risk, like low, mod, high. I mean, there's a lot of latitude in between those low, moderate, high system things that it's hard to quantify. But the drastic shift was we're going to stop the once and done thing. We're going to say, okay, we're going to have periodic reassessments, but also you're required to build in this monitoring of your security as part of the cycle or part of the software cycle or the accreditation cycle, whatever part of that, whether it's at the system or application level, that has to be built in. And then additionally, you can't, when you get to authorization, you have to have a strategy for how you're going to do that. There has to be some way you have to demonstrate how you're going to go take that security state now and maintain it going forward.
Yeah, I wanted to say too, so we kind of, the segue in from the DICAP, from the prescriptive, not really looking at the system or level setting what the system does in RMF, even though that you're not maybe have to follow that compliance or follow RMF, what we're our hypothesis is that the RMF is a solid thing, right? And especially if you're looking to go move to DevOps, that following this process, the 6-step process of that we're going to go over today is a positive thing.
This is what DevOps is really, right? Give me stuff faster. Have any of you guys seen that Dilbert where like the boss guys comes in and he's like, I saw this thing, I was reading this thing on Agile and it says that I can do like so much code with like one programmer and we can get rid of all of you guys who only need one programmer. And isn't that what people hear when they hear DevOps? Like, oh, you mean I can deploy in like 30 seconds? All you gotta do is like type a line of code and it's pushed to production automatically. But as an aside to that, often what gets left out of the discussion is the security of the deployment pipeline. And so I think, to be honest, working on the security side, I think when DevOps or developers hear this in terms of developing code in a DevOps environment, they think I can build insecure stuff faster, right? Like I can get it to production really fast now. Like, I mean, sure, we can fix things faster, but often because we're not considering security in the first place, we're just getting it to production insecurely faster.
Saw a lot of head shake when you said that.
Sorry, clicker.
So once again, to the manager speak, right? Everybody, there are plenty of synergies here. We're giving them out today. And there's a lot of synergies between the RMF and the DevOps cycle, or the continuous delivery pipeline. And this graphic here, you can see the white, right? The white text is the DevOps, right? The DevOps pipeline. The black text is the RMF process, where the RMF process is a 6-step process starting with categorization and the selection, categorization of data and the selection of controls, the implementation of controls, the assessment, authorization, and monitoring, where I'll let you read the other ones. But
Yeah.
So this, I think, maybe, I don't know if this one or the RMF meme is probably, but I might like this
I
one.
like this one, yeah. I mean, everyone likes synergies, right? So let's go back to work and we'll talk about the synergies we're going to provide by DevOps and all this stuff. So essentially, really what we're trying to map or portray here is at which phases of the processes you can map this in. And initially we tried to kind of talk about, okay, if you were a DevOps shop and you were looking for a security standard and you're like, okay, we want to build security into our development process, what would that look like if we wanted to use RMF for that? But it's kind of hard to try to dual purpose it. So I think there is some value there, and I think you can, if you're looking for a standard of compliance that is kind of ubiquitous across many different regulation standards or compliance standards that you would want to use, that would be a good one. But I think the primary benefit that we are hoping to bring forward is that for a government environment or for someone implementing according to that standard, that the DevOps provides you a lot of latitude, or in the management speak, efficiencies.
Just real quick, the thought came to me too about the DICAP. Maybe what we didn't talk about too is that the entire process, if you've ever been involved in it, is such a painful thing where literally you could add 50 to 75% to the bottom line of what the code and the infrastructure should cost to get it an ATO under DICAP, right? And the idea with RMF should be cheaper, faster, better.
Exactly. Yep. So the first phase of an RMF environment is categorization, and that's that idea of, hey, just how important is this system application to my organization? So, I mean, and one of the problems here that is going to jump out, at least it jumped out to me right away, is when you start talking to people about, okay, we need to secure our critical information, where the heck is the critical information? Does anyone know? You start asking around, okay, where is the proprietary data if you're in the private sector? Where is the financial data, the health data? Where is the classified data? Like, they should have like a sensitive data hole and you should put it all in there, like so you could just pull it out and secure it in that one spot, but it's not like that, right? It's all over your network. It's usually not segmented correctly in terms of protection, but that's one of the hard parts of this initial process is figuring out where the heck the stuff is so you can even try or attempt to secure it. Now, if you're looking at it from an application level, the first thing you want to figure out is okay, if you're coming at this blind or blank slate wise from automation, and you're saying, okay, we don't have any automation, I'd like to get there, you're going to want to start trying to figure out what the heck your automation is going to look like in this phase. Because from the RMF perspective, from that process, you're just saying, hey, what is this worth? What's the impact? And let's move on from that and start looking at what controls we want to apply to it. But if you're actually trying to automate stuff, then you want to say, okay, how can I start building those automation baselines, or how can I figure out where automation applies and how it best applies early on in the process?
So, over the past, I don't know how many years, so we do a lot of assessments of third parties, government agencies, small to medium-sized businesses. And one of the first questions that you go in and you ask, how's your network set up? Have you categorized your data? Do you know where your data is at? And I can't say 100%, but I would say well over 95% of organizations really can't answer this. And hopefully, by implementing this process, this categorization phase will be something that would be a no-brainer. And obviously, if you didn't have users, this would be probably easier as well.
Definitely. And of course, the key takeaway, because I know you're listening to us journal and talking here, it's hard to get anything out of it. But the key takeaway, try to identify a key takeaway from each step. But the key takeaway is here, when you're building something new or trying to get something accredited or just out to production, because it's in the private sector, that's kind of what it is, right? Think about what's the impact of the data, and then how does that relate to how I want to secure it? Because that's the real question we want to ask ourselves. In all of the other fluff aside, that's really what the key is. Okay, what's it going to do if it goes down? Even if it's from the developer accidentally shuts off the web service. That's still down, right? So how does it impact me? And so part of that design phase that you can really set yourself up well for success on the later phases of this, where you're going to do some heavy automation, is figuring out what are the change gates. So on the government side, you have approvals. It's like a approval palooza, right? Everybody has to approve this. This has to be approved and signed off on. So identify those areas or things in your processes where someone has to approve it, so that you can build automation to meet those goals. Like if there needs to be an approval process, and this is something that Frank and I worked on not too long ago, where we had, so the idea that we want to make sure that we can still, before code goes into another environment, how do you give someone making a decision who may not have intimate development knowledge of what's going on, how do you give them the information they need to have to make a yes or no decision on whether that gets propagated or pushed to the next phase or into production? So thinking about these ideas, okay, what are the critical areas of this? What needs to be decided on? How do I give them that information in an automated way? And then we had a recent experience where we were working in an RMF environment for the government, and this goes back to the risk why government's always efficient, right? We needed to get a laptop accredited at a secret level. So we went through the process. The hardening things are not that difficult, so that's some of the things we volunteered to do. But the cost of accrediting a single laptop was about $800. It was like an i5, 6 gigs of RAM. Might have been, I think it was Red Hat, just standard stuff. $75,000 of labor. That's true.
True story.
We said you weren't going to believe us, but $75,000 to accredit a $700 or $800, maybe $800, because the government probably bought it, so maybe it was $1,000. I don't know.
Yeah. And you wonder why there's the $2,000 hammer, but yeah. So not only would it be $75K, it would have been 6 months too, right?
Yeah,
something
6
crazy.
months to get a laptop approved.
Ridiculous.
Before. Yeah. So selection is, okay, I know what my impact of this data is, okay? So then what does that mean in terms of the security you're going to implement on? And a lot of times in government sectors, that's already decided for you. In other words, you don't have a choice. So if you're a moderate impact system, controls are going to apply, and you have to either show how you've done them or show how you've implemented them, or tell us why you didn't do that, right? But in both government and private sector, there's a lot of specialization after that fact. So say I want to put a Windows host on the network. That's sometimes the requirements we get. Hey, I need a Windows box on the network. Okay, there's a lot of things beyond that that really have a impact on what the security profile of that device looks like. Is it something that's supporting, is it a DC? Is it a web server? Is it something that's supporting automation? There are a lot of things that can kind of really drastically affect what that thing should be allowed to do, how you would harden it, and things like that. So a quick way to shortcut some of that, especially, and once again, driving your automation, is deciding early on, okay, what are the types of things we have, and then you can start at the lowest level. Very easy. Linux, Windows. That's 2 baselines. right? Most of us have Linux, Windows, some Macs here and there, but no.
Whatever.
Macs keep help desks in business, right? Isn't that why we have them, so we can keep our help desk people? Anyway, sorry. No, the Windows and so you have 2 baselines, or 3. If you are having Mac shop, you got 3 baselines. That's the place you can start with that. And then beyond that is think about business questions that affect the security of or the functionality, which is what your users and your developers care about, the functionality of that host.
Right. In this situation, the data impact, the second question there is it goes from, if there's a breach or disclosure of information that it wouldn't significantly impact the organization or agency, where a moderate may have some significant impact, loss of money, where and then, depending on the industry that you're in, high would be something along the lines of, loss of data could be loss of life, right? So you could come up, if you don't use these are NIST standard, right? If you follow the NIST stuff, these are the NIST standards.
So the key here, once again, the takeaway is, having an idea for yourself as an organization, whether it's the RMF or whether it's like 800-171, which is really a boiled down version of those massive 853 standards, like figuring out what you want to do as an organization to define what looks good from a security perspective. Okay, I have a DMZ e-commerce application. You might say, you know what, I'm losing money every second that thing has a problem. Therefore, that's a high system to me, right? Military or DoD wise, they don't care about that. But once again, it really comes down to defining at an organizational level, okay, how are we going to secure things? And then how do we want to standardize that across the board? Now, you can do that and build all of that yourself, but there's a lot of frameworks out there that you could probably just pull one in, pick and choose a little bit, and start from something like that. And the key takeaway, once again, just defining something at an organizational level that says, okay, this is how we're going to define security, low, mod, high, like whether it's by payment processing, where data is, or the classification or what it processes. Okay, now one of the cool things as we were working through this is that, well, I don't know if it's a cool thing, but as a geek, it seems like a cool thing. So SSPs, everyone know what a system security plan is? Yeah, aren't they a blast to write? Right? Isn't it great to just go through there and just update Word documents? And Scott was telling a story about consultants.
Yeah. Actually, we get paid by the pound, right? The more paperwork there was, they would,
Yeah. So that's what,
and they would do that. And the true story is that they would think that if they would kill and win the system security plan with, just like when you were in high school, if there was that thing, nobody would even read it all, right? So it had to be secure when it's that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
yeah,
So pay by the pound.
it's 1,000 pages. I mean, it's got to be
good.
secure. Be secure. Okay, so the key here. Sorry, I'm going to read my slide. Sorry. So going back to the SSP part. So treating compliance and security activities as another part of the development process. So instead of having, okay, security guys over here, there's some security stuff, then you got your dev guys over here working on important stuff, right? And then how we're seeing sometimes, especially in the private sector. Hold on, you're going to turn off my money-making machine or slow it down so that I can put security in. But anyway, putting it all in the same bucket, okay? And then establishing, based on your common controls, of, okay, we need to implement this, we need to do this, we need to do that. Establishing user stories or backlog items or tasks, however you track them internally. Establishing that in the same bucket as a development effort. So you say, okay, I'm working in development on this product. Here are my security tasks. Here's my development tasks. They're in the same bucket. They have to be prioritized along with all of the other work, so that you can kind of see where things are. Now, here's the cool thing about, or why I think it's cool about it, is that, okay, if you make your security controls tasks or stories, then as you implement those things and check in things against those tasks and stories, you have a couple things. First of all, to an auditor, which we all love auditors, in addition to compliance, right? To an auditor, you have a trail from what you've done compliance-wise, or what you say you've done, directly back to code and network changes that have been checked in or done in support of that task. And going back to the SSP, what you have now, if you go through, so say you log back into your task tracking tool and you say, hey, what's my security status? Pull out your security-related items. What is the completion status on all of those? You can get a very quick assessment of where you're at as part of the product development lifecycle, or even later on after it's been fielded, where you're at compliance-wise. You can see what's been checked in, what's remaining to be done because of sub-stories and tasks. And then finally, exporting that out is this magical thing called an SSP, because you have what you've done, you said you were going to do, what you've done, checked in, and then that export that the developer, hopefully, because all of us developers write really great check-in comments, right? Yeah. Anyways, that's that's another organizational problem. But anyway, but yeah, so if you have good comments there, then you have what you've done technically also in the same thing, which exporting that creates an SSP because you've outlined those tasks as part of the security controls. And I don't know if, yeah, so the tailoring went back to the questionnaire. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped over that. But some way of saying, okay, what do we do that's a little different? Because everyone does something a little bit different industry-wise, or, I mean, maybe organization-wise, maybe you yourself do something a little bit different. But you want to be able to try to figure out that and then make it a process you can actually automate. Automation.
It's key.
Implementation. This is the hard part. So you've got a common set of controls, right? You've been working hard. You've talked to your managers. They've forced all those developers to do these things for security, or to agree to do these things for security. You've got an idea of the impact level of this to your system. And now you're ready to say, okay, let's start writing stuff. So this is really the hard part. It really is. Because you're going to say, especially if you do not have an automation background or support, then it's going to be difficult because you're starting from ground zero, square one, pick your metaphor there. But you have to figure out, okay, how are we going to automate this from a technical perspective? How do all these things work? So you're going to heavily rely on your development staff and your IT support staff who love security. They love doing security testing, and they would much rather put down their projects and come help. Oh, no, they really wouldn't, would they? But anyway, it's a big change, really. It's really going to be finding a tool, picking what's right for your organization in terms of automation, and then getting to work.
So one of the critical things here that we've discussed several times about this also helps with keeping scope, image scope, right? You're able to control the things that go out and hopefully hide the security from the developers before it gets to the developers, right? Things are built in. So your dev AMIs or whatever are the same as what you're flowing into operations.
Yep.
So.
And then just picking those items of security, hopefully by priority of, so what you've identified as problems or security controls that you're going to meet, picking those off of that backlog or story list, the JIRA issue, whatever it is, and then moving forward with them and trying to prioritize that by criticality is important, especially when trying to keep up with the speed of what we're hoping you're going for in the development operation. So once again, a good question to ask here is, so what's the goal of the control, or what's the goal of what I'm doing? Because that's a lot of times what gets lost in the compliance versus real security thing, right? They want you to do what it says on the paper without understanding what the reasoning behind, and sometimes the paper is just a stupid idea. I mean, it's not like there were Martians that came in, dropped off these perfect compliance standards, right? People develop these, and sometimes they're not very well written. They don't really reflect real world security very well. So the key, though, especially in the private side, if you're not defined by compliance, as we all are in the government, you want to make sure that you're developing controls with the goal in mind. So, I mean, automating notifications, like questions about what is the right way this should look. For example, website up, right? Can I ping it? We had how many times have you had sites go down, no one knows it went down? And it wasn't even malfeasance or anyone. It wasn't the Russians. We should blame it on the Russians, I think.
Yeah. Not to offend anybody.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So, whatever.
And then
People from West Virginia.
Yeah. I joked. I said I think I'm here, but from West Virginia, so I had to make sure I wore a West Virginia shirt. I was really trying to think of pit jokes, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, boo.
Yeah. He couldn't think of any pit jokes.
Yeah, I couldn't think of pit jokes, yeah.
But if you want to hurl Mountaineer jokes, feel free.
There you go. I have my teeth.
We'll have time at the end, yeah. So.
Okay, so then once again, just making sure that you're thinking about the security aspect from what the purpose of the thing is, because the goal here is not to get to compliance, right? The goal is to maintain compliance, maintain a secure state throughout the life cycle until you turn that server off. You want to know what's going on and when it goes wrong, whether it's a security problem or whether it's a problem with, like I said, when it's down, it's down. It doesn't matter what caused it to be down. It doesn't matter what caused it to DDoS, whether it's your application that's got screwed up request frequency or whether it's someone actually DDoSing it, right? So it's down is down. So that, I mean, the key out of the implementation phase is making sure that you have a desired good state through whether it's Puppet baselines, whether it's any of the other automation tools. I keep saying Puppet because we use Puppet. So I try to make it tool agnostic, but I'm sorry. If there are any other
What do you think about that?
proofs.
Yeah. Thanks to brains,
Yes.
actually.
Yep. So just a desired good state. So what's good if you know what's good from a technical perspective at the end of this phase, you're on the right track. Hey, look, other
Miscellaneous
yeah,
graphics.
other automation tools to prove that I'm vendor agnostic.
What happened to your meme game here too? It kind
I know,
of
it
tailed
tailed
off.
off, yeah.
Sorry.
It did tail off, I'm sorry. So then the assessment part, and this is where the bang for the buck comes in, because if you've done all these other steps right, if you've built the automation correctly to say, okay, what's the correct state, tell me when it's wrong, I mean, the assessment portion is looking at what you've got. I mean, it tells you when there's something wrong. Now, the evidence there is there are some things you may need to go look at and say, okay, I'm going to check this because the auditor wants to see a config file off of something. But the state of your application, if you're dealing with baselines, if you've tailored them correctly to the functions of the servers, if you've done that with the goal of these in mind, the goal of security in mind, and the goal of the control saying, okay, what's the object of this? Okay, what's my good state? Okay, how do I automate that good state? Is the site up? Yes. Is it down? I want to know, send me an email. Am I getting failed logins? Have they reached my regulation-defined threshold? Send me an email. Pretty
And
stuff.
through this, you can then, how do you say that word?
Yeah, you get the dynamicize stuff.
Dynamicize?
Dynamicize, yeah. One of my isms.
It's not a word.
Yeah, okay, so internet automation provides you some really great stuff because we all like going out and running the same manual web application scan or whatever it is against applications when they come through the pipeline, right? No. So something that the goal would be to have these things assessed as much as possible as part of what they call the continuous integration pipeline. Buzzword bingo again, sorry. So, but the goal is to have, so when code is checked in, have a scan run against it, and then produce the results of that scan as part of the merge request or ticket or whatever you're doing to get it to the next level. So that you have the information you need to make the decision, you have the trail information linkage to the check-in, and then you also have the security data that, once again, you wouldn't have had. Because even when you run manual scans, what do you have to do? Like, what do I do with the results now? We got to put them in an email. It's not going to be stored somewhere where you can get to it often, because it's in your sent items, and then you realize that your organization's archive policy is like 1 year long, and then who knew? Like 2 years later, someone's like, hey, this thing broke. I scanned that for that a long time ago. Yeah, sorry. I don't have the email. So assessment is really based on how well you've done in categorizing, setting up those controls, and then implementing them in an automated fashion. Authorization. This is where you realize all the work that you put in, or you realize all the work that you haven't put in, especially in automation. Because what happens when you're ready to go and you have to prove compliance? What do we immediately do? Oh, crap. I got to go dig up all this stuff. I got to figure out what the heck we did to meet all these security requirements that I knew were coming. I just didn't have them in the design phase. So now I got to figure out how the heck I'm going to get from, okay, I know I did this. I'm pretty certain I configured it this way. And then you spend a long time. I don't know how long to quantify a long time. Sometimes it's like 6 months. Smaller applications might be. I mean, you spend a long time getting ready or preparing these authorization packages. I mean, people make careers out of authorization packages.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
White collar welfare is what I call it. White collar welfare.
That's exactly. The power of saying no. People just love it when you come through with like some of your documents there, some of your documents not, and I think there's a joy in just wrecking people's world
Because they can.
because they can. Yes, very fun stuff. So, what's acceptable to be deployed? So, once again, not tailoring this to an RMF government audience. Like, what is acceptable to you in your organization for deployment? Okay. So then, build that first in step one, and then just maintain it until you're ready to deploy it. Because I mean, how many times have you done this? You're like, once again, the panic mode before you deploy. It's like, oh crap, we have all these things we haven't done because we haven't tracked it. They're not on the development list. They're not on your burn down chart. Not on any of that because I mean we don't really care about security because it's a negative thing. I understand that it doesn't provide value. It just gives you the ability to market things. But so build those things in the beginning, and then this part becomes instead of this massive overhead and scary mountain.
So just a few months ago, we were working with a client, a large client, who went through the process of building out their continuous development pipeline or deployment pipeline through AWS. So they built their using Terraform or whatever to use. They were building out their MIs and they were working with the ops folks so that the dev and ops were together, and they put months of work into it. Put a beautiful identity and access management system in it. Went to deploy. Went to the security folks, and the security folks said, you know, you have all of this wrong. So they actually spent I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and because the security was not involved in the authorization, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, a more recent example of another project we worked on, once again, true stories, sadly, but 3 years of development and there was no authentication. Knowing they're going to be on a network.
Put it on a cloud.
3 years of development and not authentication because they hadn't needed it up to that point. I mean, this is like, is this 2018? I don't know. I mean, sometimes you have to wonder, right? But that's sometimes, without thinking about the idea of what it's going to be used for, it's something you sometimes do lose sight of that. Get something out there functional, prototype, was it POC or get out, right? Get something out there. Continuous monitoring. This is the fun part. So defining green. So what is good? I mean, stuff's up. No one's stealing my stuff. That's good, right? That's the happy place that we all like to be in. Now, often we're in our happy place and we just don't know that everything's red, right? we're just. Well, my dad would say, fat, dumb, and happy. No idea that the world is burning around us because we have no visibility. So the goal is figuring out what that good state is and then verifying the state. So you can say green is no alerts or no messages. But if you have no alerting or logging set up, then you can be just as happy as you can be and you have no idea that you're getting owned, right? But something to remember here, though, also is on the other end of the spectrum, continuous monitoring doesn't mean that you're checking things every millisecond or something like that, because great way to DDoS your environment or give Splunk like $1 billion for all the logs that you generate, right? But it does need to be at some interval. You decided, hey, how long is this down before it matters? Or how long does someone having root access or getting added to a privileged group, how long is that a problem? Like, how soon would you want to know about it? And then starting defining that, and then once again, verifying it in an automated way. There are a lot of things that sysadmins and, I mean, we've done over the years that just because we don't have time. I mean, you want to go back and check. You want to just sit down and be like, hey, I should just run through some logs, see if I see anything suspicious. I mean, right? We have that goal. It's not like I'm sitting there like, hey, you know what? I haven't checked Reddit in like 10 minutes, so I should check that out for the rest of the day, right? Yeah. But I mean, you do have a goal in your mind, like this is what I want to do. I want to provide security to my organization, but often it gets lost because there are so many other things competing for your time, attention, and resources.
So we kind of jumped the gun on the.
Oh yeah, I know. I wasted one of my trench tips. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did too.
So yeah, here's the deal with this. Continuous monitoring just means if the application changed, whether your developers did it, or whether bad guys did it, or whether someone unplugged a power cord somewhere, like, how would you know? Or what do you want to know about, right? So the things you want to know about, just effectively communicate them to you, to the people who need to approve those changes, to your team, to management. He said he wasn't going to tell him who I was the manager, but he lied.
He looks like a manager.
Yeah. So I already talked about the nuclear fallout thing. That was it just blew my mind. That was I was like, wow, is this it was one of my earlier on engagements with the government. And I was like, is this really how the government works? Like, you come in and, I mean, I think we spent like 8 weeks trying to prep this site, a full team of like 5 people, because it's air gapped and you got to like manually bring in updates through a very secure process, right? Haven't updated anything in 3 years. We're going to make it very hard for you to update it in the amount of time we need to do it. But it goes, to me, that was like just the epitome of the old DATCAP process of, hey, we're gonna make this thing secure. We're gonna check you very well right now. We're not gonna talk to you again for 3 years, and then we're gonna check you then, right? Interesting. And then also the idea of a cost to secure being greater than the asset you're securing. Does it not blow your mind sometimes? But I mean, that's our fault as security people. We're like, hey, you got to do all this stuff. You can't do that. You can't do this. And the guy's like, it's just like I have like 10 cents of data in here, and it's not even if it gets disclosed as 10 cents of data, because sometimes we think, well, hey, it's just one social security number. That's not what I'm talking about. But
yeah, and usually that happens when you try to bolt things on at the end, almost always, right? Exactly. So if you're in from the beginning, obviously you guys preaching to the choir, but yeah, the cost is always greater. Length is always longer if you try to bolt this on at the end.
Yep. And usually unsuccessful. So the easy button. The easy button would be this to me. Coming to an authorization meeting, having spent like maybe 3 days or 2 days gathering the data, the tremendous amounts of information you have from your automation to prepare your deploy to production or to prepare your authorization package. Like that to me is the easy button, because we've done all this work up front. We've gotten the automation in place we need. We've identified critical impact areas. We've said, okay, this is what we want to monitor. This is the bad state. This is what we want to know when it goes south, right? That's automated and sent to me. This is how we approve changes throughout our pipeline, where we say, okay, you, Mr. Government Official, don't know a single thing about development, but you do care whether or not you have a Cat 1 vulnerability in this latest release. So I'm going to put that in the merge ticket, because I can automate the scan of the software and I can give you the results in the merge request or approval, whatever that approval process is, so you have the information you need to make an informed decision. That decision can be approved and pushed to production. That's a very minimal amount of interaction, but I mean, there is a lot behind it. But coming up on that authorization process is the same thing. The same thing applies to where you've put in the work to identify the critical areas of your environment, which parts should be more secure than others. And it's now the tailoring process. It's sometimes kind of funny to me, because knowing how like I work, so I'm going to call myself lazy, but like, you know, when they make controls optional, what do? Not doing that, right? So the tailoring sometimes, I think it's a little hard to make people do, because it really is like, okay, what's compliance standard? That's what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. But there's a lot of optional stuff where you can make yourself much more secure. It's kind of like the multi-factor authentication. I mean, we've known for years that multi-factor authentication, you should just do it. It's not difficult. There have been products out there for like, what, 2 decades? I mean, it seems like 2 decades. Probably not 2 decades. Long time.
Yeah, maybe.
And we haven't done it. Yeah, and we haven't done it. But if you put in the work, and you can come to these like an assessment thing. An assessment should be nearly a blip on your radar, but often we have 12. I don't want to say 12 people working in the security department very heavily to prepare for assessments, because we haven't done any work beforehand. Because it's time. Well, we got to do the assessment thing again. Whereas it should be figuring out, okay, we're just going to gather the information that I already have, maybe pull stuff out of our user stories, out of our task management, export it. I'd love to see. It wouldn't be great to just like click export, so you have your compliance, your controls. You export that from your user tasks, and you have at least start of your SSP. Probably a good chunk of your SSP if you can convince developers to document things well. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. That's okay. We try to document things well, but we don't always succeed. Sorry. Any questions? This is great.
Okay.
That means we answered all the questions. Yeah. Right.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the time.